This would be classified media-social media.
Right.
And the person that manages that is a woman named Kat. That's not a real name, but that's her nickname. And I've had her since she was a senior in university, came to work for us as an intern. And I told the then staff, make sure that we hire this gal when she gets out of school. So 4, 5, 6 months go by, and I remember, well, where's this kid? Oh, she had 3 other job offers, so we decided not to make an offer. So I fired that person on the spot. And the next 2, I said, if you don't have her, this was a Wednesday evening, if she's not working here Monday, you're fired as well. She was working there on Saturday, actually. She came on Saturday. So, but she's the one that would have contacted you.
I like the way you operate. Men like you aren't being created any longer, are they?
No. I'm at best, I'm a Neanderthal. But I remind people that Neanderthals' brains were 25% bigger than Homo sapien.
Why do you think our society isn't creating men like you anymore?
No accountability, and you can blame the parents. The generation after my generation, I was born, I'll be 80 my next birthday, but the generation after my generation is, if they're still alive, want to be liked as opposed to being effective. And we have now got 70 years, more or less, of people wanting to be liked as opposed to being effective. And my dad's generation didn't give a shit about being liked. In fact, I tell people, if you like me, I did something wrong. I'm not here to be liked. If you want to be liked, get a dog. I mean, and but when I started this coaching in 1993, I'd just been thrown out of the company I founded unceremoniously, and I had a fight to get my golden parachute, as it used to be called. I was persona non grata. In other words, people wouldn't hire me to be CEOs, even though I ran a big public company that I founded from scratch. But I was a shit disturber. I mean, I'm on the board. I mean, first thing I'm probably going to do is fire the lawyers and the accountants, if they have been decades. And then the next thing I'm going to do is fire 2 of the 5 top revenue producers the company has, because I want them to know, realize with no reservations whatsoever that there's a new sheriff in town, and I'm it. And then we get a mass of resignations, and I redo everybody's employment contract, and they're what it's called now in today's parlance, major shareholder friendly. And that's a big difference than a contract that you get from an IBM or a Microsoft or whomever, British Petroleum. Now they are not only not major shareholder friendly, not minor shareholder friendly, they are employee friendly. And so it's culture shock. And so I didn't get any offers. So I was sitting having dinner in Houston, Texas with a buddy of mine who I've known since I'm a kid, Vietnam, war hero, pilot, Marine, blah, blah, blah. He said, why don't you teach? I taught a year. It's not the most unsatisfying year I ever had, but it's close to it. I taught where I went to school, Cal State Northridge, in Northridge. And I taught at pro bono. I taught a honors class. Started with 335 students. It ended with 13. Because you can drop classes every once in a while and it not be counted against your record. And so I was ended up with 13. So I used to send a bus to Northridge campus. I had an estate in Rolling Hills overlooking the Pacific Ocean. And so I sent a bus and then a limo. As the class dwindled in size, and it was only twice a week class, I sent a bus that could hold 60, 70, and at the end I sent a extra long, you know those kind of limos that you get on a wedding night?
The stretch limos?
Exactly. And so we had the last 7 or 8 weeks at my home in Rolling Hills, Palos Verdes. And so anyway, and the 13 that made it through the year all thought for sure they'd get an A. And I know at that time the dean of the School of Business was a guy named Bob Hossick. And he says, they're all expecting an A. And they're going to hold that out as a banner or a recommendation when they go off to get a job that they got an A from me. I said, well, Bob, I'm not sure I'll give any A's. I wound up giving 1 A and 12 B's. And they actually protested. They went, there's an accreditation committee on campus. If you think you got fucked on a grade, you can go. And 11 of the 12 B's went to that committee. Of course, at the end of the day, they can't make me change the grade. And I didn't change the grade. I'll do one better. I won't teach you again. And so.
But the B makes them want to try harder.
Correct.
There's a great quote that I've heard Joe Rogan quote many times, and I'll quote it here. I'll read it here from G. Michael Hoff. Hard times create strong men. Mm-hmm. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times.
Correct.
We're in a time right now where we're getting ready for some hard times, it sounds like.
It's already started. And Professor Hawkins said it in 2004, when he could still talk, barely, before he had to talk through a computer. And he said words to the effect, we're slightly more intelligent, only slightly more intelligent than an average chimpanzee. We're on a slightly more than average planet, and there must be a billion of us out there. We just haven't found them yet. And we have a proclivity for feeling sorry for ourselves. And no other animal in the human race or on the planet that we know of feels sorry for itself. A horse will run under you until it dies. And you have a couple of examples. Well, I didn't discover that thought process till 10 years later, 2014. And I said something to the effect, I was speaking at, not Oxford, but I was speaking at one of the universities that I talk at. And somebody jumped up and says, Mr. Pena, do you know that that's Professor Hawking, what he says? And I said, no, I didn't. I knew who he was. And so then I realized that it was similar, I was saying, except I was 10 years late. And then I've gone on to say, since 2014, well, if I'm only 10 years behind the great Professor Hawkins, I'm in a rarefied environment. So, but Joe, that was an interesting interview that I did with Joe. He's a nice guy.
Yeah.
But you know what the derivative of nice is? 13th, 14th century, Mongoloid idiot retard. And we've come in 500-600 years from Mongoloid retard idiot. He's a nice guy. And my mother used to say, I got a nice girl that I want you to go out with. I used to jump. The last thing I want, Mom, is a nice person. What I want is, right up close to a nymphomaniac. That's what I want.
Tell me about your childhood. You grew up with both parents?
Yeah. I grew up in East L.A., not 25 miles from here,
right.
In the hood, Barrio. And my dad was a very powerful cop back in the good old days when, rightly or wrongly, cops could get away with anything. And he was one of those cops that did. He was one of the first Hispanic detectives, LAPD. And he had 28 years of service. And then he left to go with the CIA. So he retired. And then when Robert Kennedy was killed, they brought him back to head up the investigation for the Robert Kennedy assassination. Hmm. And the idea since then is they brought in a spook to cover up what had happened. I never asked my dad this question, but how did 8 bullets get fired out of a 6-bullet gun? My kid brother has asked him that, who's 15 years my junior, but I never asked him that. My brother tells me, he says it was a ricochet. Anyway, but that's the excuse for 8 bullets fired from a 6-bullet gun. But anyway, I grew up a bad kid. I tried to kill my teacher in the 5th grade in grammar school, Doris Place, which is celebrating our 100th anniversary next year, of which there's a sign outside of Doris Place on a marquee. Thank you, Mr. Pena. Means thank you for all the money I've given him, and I've built shit for him, and I get off on that. But the last 2 principals, with tears in their eyes, they say, Mr. Pena, why did you come back here? This must have bad memories for you. No. Did you really try to kill the teacher? No, I don't think I was thinking that. I was just pissed off. And I was acting out my anger when I dropped that aquarium from the second floor onto his head, standing on the ground on the first floor.
That'll kill somebody.
Yeah, but he moved. Hit him in the shoulder. His shoulder, all I remember is was about down here. Dislocated it, shoved it down. And that same teacher, as I know in recent years, was teacher of the decade there. But he either knew something about me that I didn't know, that I could be somebody. But every day I walked in, they put a dunce cap on me. And normally before lunchtime or after lunchtime, they shoved me in a closet. I had to take the dunce cap off because I couldn't get in the closet with the dunce cap on. And I was just there a few weeks ago where I don't know, of course now I'm big, but then I don't know how I got in that little closet. And I'd shit my pants in the closet and they'd leave, I couldn't go to the bathroom. There's no statute of limitation. I could sue the Los Angeles City School District for $1 trillion and probably win. But he was on me. I was at least 2 or 3 times a week. I was in the principal's office before lunchtime for being reprimanded, scolded for something. When we walked around the campus with my wife a couple of years ago, with the old principal, not the principal that got now, and I say, "Didn't there used to be a tetherball thing here where you play tetherball?" Yeah. And I turned to my wife and said, "Sally, this is where I broke a kid's arm in 7 places." And then we walk someplace else and says, "This is where I almost blinded a kid." And so then now the principal's crying. He says, "How can you walk through this?" And I said, "Well, it's not exactly memory lane, but at some point in time, my life changed. It wasn't because of this little school, and so when I tried to kill the teacher, they didn't throw me out of the school district. Out of the school. They threw me out of the school district. So I had to go to the Valley, and my dad bought a house he couldn't afford. The house was $13,500, and he couldn't afford it. He had to get 2 extra jobs. One was security at the May Company, and one was security at Vons, as I recall. But my mother was convinced it wasn't her baby, it was the environment, because it was a tough neighborhood. And so, but then I just fucked things up there in the Valley. I got in a lot of trouble.
You're a problem kid.
Yep, and the principal of the high school I graduated from, Reseda High, who we just completed last week, the first scholarships to students that attend Cal State Northridge. And so not that many kids want to go to Cal State Northridge. And so we just finished the first scholarships. And I'm standing in the principal's office that I knew well, and there's a crack on the glass on the top of the desk. And I said, "Is this an old desk, ma'am?" She says, "Yes. I put that crack there in 1963. And the fucking thing hasn't been replaced yet?" She goes, "No." And she says, it's a principal's, a guy named Newman. "How did it break?" She says, "Well, there's 2 stories. My story is I hit the desk with my fist, telling them that if you throw me out now, I'm not coming back." Of course, and then the other story is that I jumped across the table and my knees hit the glass and broke glass. I don't remember jumping across any desk to choke him or anything. But if it wasn't for the fact that my dad's older brother was head of the foreign language department for LA City Schools, my dad was a very senior cop, I'm sure I would have gone to prison. I've been arrested 5 times that I can remember. I did a lot of stupid shit.
Gangs?
No gangs.
Stayed on
No
you.
gangs, no drugs. I was more afraid of my dad. My dad's solution to almost everything was a bullet in your motherfucking head, and I'm the motherfucker, they'll put the bullet there. When we talked about drugs, there's only one cure for drugs, and that's a motherfucking bullet. And he had a .38 revolver to my head with a hammer cocked back. I can still see the bullets in the lower chambers if I close my eyes. And my mother screaming and yelling. She puts the 2 TVs on that we had in the house, full blast. She puts the 3 radios on in the house, full blast, so the neighbors shouldn't hear either 1, my dad shoot me in the head, and or 2, my dad screaming at me. And I believed him. In fact, I just, my wife for my 79th birthday a few months ago, rented a big yacht, Elizabeth Taylor and Richie Burton's yacht, for my 79th. We sailed through the Mediterranean. And at that same time, a guy named Lynch, a billionaire Lynch, got hit by supposedly a tornado. Somebody sunk his boat. Well, we were on the other side of Sicily when that happened. He was on the northern side, or the side. We were on the other side. And so 3, 4 people on the boat, my kid brother and 3 guys that I've known almost all my life, they all said the same thing. They started relating stories about me as a kid that I've either blocked out or forgot. And the same Marine super guy from the Vietnam War that suggested I teach, he said, when we come over your house, Dan, I'd stand near your mother because I thought that Manny, my dad, wouldn't hit me if I was standing next to your mom. I said, oh, okay. And then the other guy, Howard, and his father was an alpha male hero from the Second World War, the Buds, okay? But his father didn't like his son, but he loved me. My other friend, Howard, used to say, that your dad always carried 2 guns, which he did, always. On the weekend, he always had a gun on his hip and a gun on his ankle. We'd go to the liquor store. If he went to Vaughn's, he always carried 2 guns. And he said you can never be over-prepared. And so Howard said that everybody was afraid of your dad because he carried 2 guns. You'd go over on a Saturday afternoon to watch football or something on our TV, which was about that big. We're sitting there having beers with 2 guns. And when he sat down, he'd take the gun off his hip and put it on the table because it fucked up his stomach, or I don't know what it did. And so they were reminding me of these things. And then my kid brother, who's 15 years my junior, he said that everybody was afraid. They were afraid to look at Mom because my mother was really good looking. That what Manny might do. And so...
So your dad was tough.
Yep.
Do you feel like his toughness is what...
Oh, it's the only thing.
Made you who you are?
It's the only thing.
Yeah.
He lightened up on my kid brother, who just retired a few weeks ago, the number 2 guy in the LA County Fire Department, the 3rd largest fire department in the country. He went up the civil service route, and my dad used to tell him and then tell me, which we both thought was bullshit, this beating hurts me more than it hurts you. I could never relate that. And I asked Vince, my kid brother, he says, that's just a load of shit.
So there was physical abuse?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He didn't yell. He hit before he yelled.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he didn't yell at me. I can't remember. Yeah, I don't think he ever yelled at Vince.
Do you think that's a proper way to parent?
No, but it's closer to the proper than today. Now, in Scotland, if I call my kid a fat ass, that's a hate crime.
Right.
I go to jail.
No, our society doesn't like those kind of men.
No. I use a film clip about a guy during Corona that saved a zoo with his own money because all the animals were going to die because there was nobody coming to the zoo to pay money. And they showed his training regimen from when the lions are this big. He'd take off his slipper. And if the lions growled when they shouldn't, he'd not hit hard, tap them on the nose. And so now the lions are big. And so now he's there, and he goes in, and they're playing with him, they're jumping on him and this, that, and they get in a fight with each other. He takes his slipper off. The lions are flat on their belly. Pavlov's dog kind of deal.
They're trained.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember my mother growing up in East LA. No, I'm not going to do that, Mom. I may have even told her to go fuck off. I'm not going to do it. And I said, what are you writing down, Mom? I'm writing down a note to your father. I don't want to forget your insolence. Could you repeat what you asked me to do, Mom? The last thing I wanted, the very last thing I wanted, for Dad to get involved. He was gone a lot of times, weeks at a time. Now, I now know, before he went with the CIA, he was working for the CIA. He was in, when Che Guevara got whacked, my dad was there. When Martin Luther King got whacked, my dad was there. When 2 or 3 other guys got whacked, my dad was there. Did he do? I don't know. Nobody knows. But I can tell you there were people behind the knoll when JFK got killed. Those are real people. Those people weren't blind and deaf. When they show film of the CIA, not the CIA, Secret Service, all these guys, watching the guy climb on the roof, give me a break. And having been responsible for president's security once, President Nixon during the Cold War, I was a young Army officer. Nobody wanted to do his security detail when he came in 1968. I volunteered, and very nice. And I met 4 other presidents. He was very presidential. But anyway, getting back to the security, it's not possible that somebody didn't have something to do, in my opinion, something to do with somebody shooting at the former president. It's just not possible. But in the day that I was responsible for Nixon, if we'd screwed up like that, there would have been 4-star generals taking early retirement. To the best of my knowledge, only that lady that was the head of this Secret Service is the only one that fell on a sword. But the world is, in my opinion, is ass backwards now. But getting back to my, as a youth, but I lived in an era where you kept the doors of your house unlocked. You know, and now, I mean, with all the screwed up things that can happen to you, kids getting kidnapped off the street, and now you don't read about or hear about that happening in the hood.
They don't report it.
Well, and they take care of it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't even get the police involved.
No. Because that process is way too long for them. They want vengeance, if you will.
What would you say is the most formative thing that happened in your childhood? Is there one single event that stands out?
Trying to kill the teacher, and me getting arrested the 5th or 6th time, and knowing that if I got arrested anymore, I was going to go to prison. And I volunteered for the draft in 1966. And in less than a year, I went from a private to an officer. And I was competing.
The Vietnam?
Pardon?
Vietnam?
Yeah. And I realized I wasn't just a grab ass. I was super smart. Being called a dunce and shitting myself until my mother came to pick me up, to a leader of real men. Changed my life forever.
Were you always smart? Just not meant for school?
Not by grades, no.
No, not meant for school.
No. I was conniving. I mean, I could figure out, if I was a computer nerd now, I would have figured out how to get into the Federal Reserve. That's how kind of smart I was.
Yeah, see, clever is different than being book smart.
Yeah. And I've always been that. And I've always, some of the mentors I've had and had the privilege of working with, it's remarkable. And to a man, they all said the same thing. You remind me of me. Bunker Hunt, of the Hunt family. Konstantin Grassos, the CEO of Onassis Group, best friends of Aristotle for 60, 65 years. Cyrus Vance, former Secretary of State. I mean, I've been around, and they all say the same thing. And when I was younger, young, still getting arrested, if Dan when he ever gets his head screwed on straight, not if, when. And my mother believed that. My dad didn't. My dad just thought that, he was of the belief that you cannot reconstitute a convict mentality. He didn't believe that. Towards the end of his life, when he was in his 90s, he did, but yeah, so was the Army. More being an officer. I was the, what do you call it? I was the youngest company commander in NATO at 22. I was smart as shit. I used to take on all projects. I didn't care what they were. You didn't have to, I didn't ask what it was. I just said yes. And that's how I got to be the youngest company commander. Yes. They got me my tit in the ring a couple of times. There was a colonel on post that had hated pigeons. And the pigeon was shitting all over cars. But the pigeons seemed to only shit on officers' cars. We never cleared that part up. He says, Pena, get your sorry Mexican ass over here. He says, you know what a pigeon looks like, right? I'm paraphrasing this. Yes, sir. I says, over this week I want you to kill every motherfucking pigeon on post. Yes, sir. So I went and got a couple of the guys in my company. One was from Arkansas. The other one was Louisiana. They didn't know how to shoot. We massacred hundreds, not like the newspaper said, thousands, but hundreds of pigeons on post. And no pigeon ever shit on the general's car or the colonel's car again. But it hit the Stars and Stripes. There used to be a newspaper in the military, Stars and Stripes. And my dad writes me one of the few letters when I was overseas. Tell me this isn't you. Yeah, it is me, Dad. But anyway.
But another young man going through the adverse events that you went through as your childhood might break and might try to escape the trauma of that with drugs or alcohol.
And some did.
But you're tougher and you didn't do that.
Well, I don't know if tougher. I was more afraid of my dad. Fear works. Believe me, it still works today. There are ways to hire people. It doesn't matter what state, what the contract says, you can still fire them. You got to work at it, and there are. Jack Welch, who I never had the pleasure of meeting, arguably the best CEO in the last 50, 100 years, he had a thing called rank and yank. They used to call him Neutron Jack because he'd kill all the people of a new company, or get rid of them, but wouldn't destroy the buildings. A neutron bomb doesn't destroy buildings, only humans. And so let's say there's 50 in a company or a division. Every 50 ranks the other 49 every 90 days. Bottom 20%, they then have 90 days to get their shit straight or they're fired. Really, he did it every 45 days, and he didn't give him it was the bottom 40%. Well, you look at the numbers, he's the greatest CEO that ever lived. And so I just modified his rank and yank.
Motivation is more important than talent. Talent's great, but without motivation, it's
yeah. And
useless.
Part of that motivation has to be the pay package. We always paid people between 20 and 40% more.
But fear is a hell of a motivator.
Fucking ain't right. It just is.
There's nothing like it.
It's a shitty way to run a railroad, but it works. It works today. And Russia and countries like that understand it better than most. When the wall came down in '90, I was inundated with people from the old Iron Curtain countries for my training. I trained a lot of, a couple of the oligarchs for Putin, amongst other words, the former president of Hungary. I trained a lot of guys because my system that I believe in, that it works, that I've created over $1 trillion with, is basically the mafia model without a gun. We give them a alternative they can't refuse. It's not because we're going to blow the back of their head off, but we make sense of it. There's very few people that are in business that wouldn't like, when they died, their business not to go down a rat hole the government take it over, et cetera, et cetera. Very few. Once in a while there is, fuck this, But for the most part, they want to see not necessarily their progenies, but somebody to benefit. Maybe it's the poor, maybe it's, and so I discovered that over 50 years ago and did it for myself for 20 years, and then I started doing it with the kids through coaching. After that unsuccessful teaching experience, I started coaching. I didn't exactly know what I was doing at when I first started, but for the last 31 years I've known, and so arguably, not arguably, we've turned out way in excess of 1 million millionaires, 50 billionaires, $2.3 trillion now.
Tell me about your class, just quickly.
Okay. Oh, well, the class is, I only give it at the castle where I live since
So you got to go to Scotland.
this century. You got to go there. But I used to, first of all, I started giving my teachings free for grammar schools in East LA. The kids were too young. Then junior high schools in East LA, the kids were too young. High schools in East LA, and I drove myself back in those days, 30 years ago, and they were more interested in stealing the hubcaps off my rolls than listening to me. And then I traveled all around the United States. I used to do it at the convention center here in LA, free, and I fed them. Okay, at the Heathrow Airport Convention Center, free, and I fed them. But what I didn't have is I had no accountability. You give somebody free, they got no skin in the game, and I couldn't keep track of their results. And even though they signed a paper that we're going to keep Mr. Pena, not nobody, but almost nobody. So then I started charging money, and I found out the higher the ticket, the more accountable. First of all, they had to get the money if they didn't steal it. They had to make the money. Guys and gals that make the money are more serious. And so then I decided the best metaphor of yesterday's dreams or today's realities was my castle, which was a dream of mine when I was younger. And so now we haven't given the seminar other than at the castle.
In Scotland?
This century.
You've lived in Scotland for?
Yeah, Scotland. I live in a 15th century storybook castle built in 1468, the beginnings of it was 1468. Oh. It was a gift from James III of Scotland to Sir John Guthrie for beating the English in some battle.
So people travel there and they do a
week.
week?
And we dress, you have to be in a suit, and the last night is a black tie function. We just finished one maybe 2 weeks ago. And it's been phenomenally successful. But more than the seminar being successful, because I'm phasing out. One of the reasons I have time to talk to you today is with all my heart, believed that I ran for Parliament this last election cycle. And I thought, I made all my plans, I phased out all kinds of stuff, all kinds of commitments. The election was last July 4th, and I lost. And I can't remember the last time I lost anything in my life. 30, 40 years, I haven't lost anything, ever. And it took me about an hour to recoup. And I said, as my 4 assistants, remember, we have open schedule now from July of this year through 25, 26. I would normally have bookings. And so then I got Kat. I says, well, okay, you know how to fill it, because my life is split up in 3 sections. Pro bono a third, managing my assets a third, and charity a third, okay? And so she found yourself interesting. I never asked her why you were interesting. I just, she knows what she's doing. And so we're filling it up. But otherwise, I thought I'd be sitting in Parliament screaming and yelling at the Prime Minister, who deserves to be screamed and yelled at, the current one. But
you're still a young man.
Yeah. Well, I have no intention of running again.
No.
It was an experience, but I have to commend the people that really do a good job. 1, they don't get paid enough, and 2, it's a full-time job. Before I got even the election, I got hundreds of requests from my constituents, potential constituents. Will you promise this, that, and the other thing? And I rarely said I could. My answer to almost everything was, I got to get elected first. Let's worry about getting me in office. And the polls, that's why when I hear these polls things, like tomorrow's election, I had an 80% approval rating. 80. And I got crushed. Because people that respond to polls normally respond to what they think is politically correct. And I wasn't politically correct, so but we only got answers from people that thought I was okay. And I would venture to guess that it's the same with the Kamala and Mr. Trump's results.
Do you like Donald Trump?
Do I like him? His alligator mouth overloads his hummingbird ass on a daily basis. But I think he'd be better for politics now than Ms. Harris. Mm-hmm. But see, I know a lot about Harris than the average meathead. I saw her climb the ladder, so to speak, here in California politics. I have guys that I was on Wall Street with that helped her climb that ladder. And I know Trump. We shared lawyers a long, long time ago. Now, whether Trump can stop Gaza and stop Ukraine, I don't know. I know he certainly thinks he can, but that doesn't mean he can. But we'll see. We'll see. But everybody cries about change, but at the end, if change affects them, they don't want it. So we'll see. I don't know.
It seems like in today's society, there's plenty of smart people, plenty of talented people, but what seems to be lacking, like since I was watching my dad, who had these qualities, he lacked courage. Men now lack courage. I see a big lack in courage in our new society.
There's a phrase, psychological phrase for exactly what you describe. It's more than courage. Somebody took my seminar years ago, and he spent a bunch of money coming, blah, 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 and he said, in those days I used to get weekly reports. He writes back that the girl that I've been running to in a 24-hour fitness in Manhattan for 4.5 years, I mustered up the grit to ask her for a coffee. He's running next to her for 4.5 years at 4 o'clock in the morning in Manhattan. And he asked her for a coffee. Now, to me, that's not courage. It's something's wrong with the male Homo sapien. We've gone from, I like her, she's walking with another guy, I hit him with a fucking club, I drag her off to my cave, to now. We have it in our loins, but it's not considered, it's beyond political correctness. But in my judgment, the lack of self-esteem and the PC movement is all a manifestation is that we have no self-esteem. We have no self-confidence anymore.
So self-esteem seems to be...
Yeah, well, self-esteem is the bedrock. All the people that I've, not every single one of them, do two things. I only know 2 high-performance people that didn't swear. Only 2 in my life. Okay? Not only do they swear, but they all got big balls, whether they're an introvert or extrovert. 2% of the high-performance people on the planet are extroverts like me. 98% are introverts, like everybody else. But they have they think enough of their own conviction to open their mouth, even if it's in a subtle way. But I mean, my 2 children work at Fortune 200 companies, big companies, and they're both fairly senior. They both make a lot of money, but they're not like me. My daughter ostensibly is thought of it as me with a skirt, but she's not. She's, for the millennials, she's pretty tough, but I mean, she's not like me. But when I graduated from the school you got to explain about in 1971, over 50 years ago, and I come back from the war, and I'm a hotshot young officer, blah, 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 blah. And I only took 2 job interviews, ones that I wanted. One was Old Carnation Company, which has been bought out since, and Dunlap. And I didn't get on job offers. And everybody in my class, Penny's going to get, he's going to go to, Blackstone wasn't there, but anyway, one of the Wall Street firms. And both the vice chairman of Carnation Company asked me for lunch. So I thought this was the job offer. And so I go to the old Carnation building on Wilshire Boulevard. And he said, we're about halfway through our first course. He says, Mr. Pena, you're probably wondering why, as vice chairman, I've asked you to lunch today. Well, I'm slightly hopeful, sir, but hope's not a strategy. But I'm an ex-Army officer. And he says, well, we're not going to make a job offer. But I felt obligated to tell you why. I sat back and tried to take a deep breath without it showing. And I said, well, I appreciate the consideration that you're showing me. I'm your 8th interview. This is way before 10, 12 interviews of Google. You know why Google and those companies have 10, 12, 15 interviews? Because nobody knows how to make a fucking decision. They got no balls, and they want to be able to spread the risk. A bunch of people approved them. I'm your 8th interview, and you working here would be like, and it was a John Birch company at the time, Carnation. You working here would be fitting a square peg in a round hole. And the other 7 people before me were afraid to tell you so. Because they thought you'd come back and buy the company someday and fire them all.
That's great.
Okay, thank you very much. Dunlap, I got a call from Human Resources had just been crowned, a new phrase. And it was ex-Army officer guy. And he said, let's have a drink. And he says, I owe you, ex-Army, blah, blah. And he told me the exact same thing. He was my 6th interview, if you count it an interview. And he says, square peg, round hole, same thing. And they were afraid that you'd come back and buy the company and fire him. I had no job offers. So I went to Wall Street, where they don't give a shit about stuff like that. No job offers. I was the king. I was emperor at CSUN, Cal State Northridge. I taught classes as an undergraduate in the graduate school. The dean, then a guy named Raby, thought so highly of me. He's a Stanford PhD. And he came back. He was a former executive VP at United States Steel. He says, you're a gifted kid, Dan, when you get your head screwed on straight. Because I was a little psycho, but...
But the reason that you didn't get any offers is because committees have their heads up their ass.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, and most of management is by committee now, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but then I went to Wall Street, and the rest is history. I went to ultimately Bear Stearns, which was a Jewish firm, which they didn't like being called a Jewish firm, as a non-Jew. And I did some pretty spectacular shit. In the 80s, arguably, if not the best financial engineering transaction in the 80s, one of the best, which was my idea, and it made me instantly wealthy. A few $100 million in my pocket, not spread around. Mm-hmm. I've done some, one of my mentees, the largest transaction in recorded history, 2017, NEOM, which is the city of the future in Saudi Arabia. Dr. Klaus Kleinfeld, I trained him, first CEO. It's now up to $2.3 trillion committed capital. Doing that kind of stuff is easy. What's hard is getting me to get meatheads to follow up. It's almost impossible.
We're not all meant to succeed.
You're preaching to the choir here, I believe. But the lies that we're told, I wasn't told this. When you grow up, it can be anything you want. That's a load of shit. That's not true. Yet kids are told that. Our kids went to the best schools money could buy, thinking wrongfully that that attitude that their great-great-great-great-grandparents came over on the Mayflower would rub off. It was dead. One generation, maximum 2 generations after those guys died. And so they were rubbing elbows with a lot of very successful families, but the what I call trust fund babies. And the kids, for the most part, with one or two exceptions, haven't turned out to do anything except blow shit up their nose and, burn through their trust money like, shit through a goose. But getting back to the original question, the Army, becoming an officer at 21, and my dad being tough.
That's what changed you, formed you?
Yeah. And my kid brother, 15 years my junior, made it up to the top of the LA County Fire Department. And he was the youngest this, all his career. The youngest this, the youngest this, the youngest
That's
this.
something to be proud of.
Absolutely.
And is there an argument to say that his life path and his achievement is, for lack of a better word, better than yours?
No, it's equal to in the.
Just different.
Yeah, it's equal to in the civil service. It's easily equal to. I mean, the number 2 guy in the 3rd largest fire department in the country is pretty phenomenal.
But you get pretty strong in your opinions. I've seen some of your seminars.
Yeah, I am strong. I'm not a wallflower.
No, you're not at all. Is there a downside to being that you're almost like a tyrant, almost like a?
No, I am a tyrant. It's not almost like.
You are. Yeah.
Like when Trump made a slip a few weeks ago when he says, "I want to be dictator for a day." That was no fucking slip. I know what he's going to do. He's got a playbook. A good portion of the people that aren't voting for him, if they knew his playbook, they'd vote for him. The same number, equal to or greater than, if they knew his real playbook, wouldn't vote for him. Because, not arguably, but the United States of America doesn't need a dictator. It needs some toughness in certain areas, but doesn't need a dictator, in my opinion, anyway. But I mean, but I am. I mean, it's my way or the fucking highway. But I know what works. And the answer when I've been interviewed over the years, and I say, there's a reason why the 3 largest sovereign funds in the world come to me for advice. Norway, Kuwait, China. From 1984 to 2018, they came to me. Not the International Monetary Fund, not the fucking World Bank. They came to me. I'm almost always right. Not always, but almost. I am the only human being you will ever meet that called negative oil in March, April 2020. It went to negative 37. I said it'd go to negative 24. This is when it was $30 a barrel on the upside. I'm a smart motherfucker. Not too many smarter than me. But I made the choice 31 years ago to bring meatheads across the goal line. I want to go 100 years from now. I want to get credit for the only guy that gave away, in the beginning, free, all the information, how a guy from East LA, all my cousins are ditch diggers, how to get rich.
That's pretty impressive, given your background.
Correct. Given anybody's background.
Anybody, yeah.
Whether I get the credit, of course, my wife contends that, and I've had people pick at my talks. I've had women pick at my talks naked. I think that's hilarious myself.
Why are people picketing your talks?
Because they know that I know guys like Trump. They think the Illuminati is for real, and 8 or 10 or 12 families run the world, which is not true. It's more like 45 or 50 families that run the world. The things, how can I be in business with the Middle Eastern countries? Kuwait, I was their fair-haired boy for almost 10 years, and they're considered the Jews of the Middle East. They thought that I was the second coming of the Messiah. And I could still be in business with the Israeli National Oil Company, Israeli government, at the same time. How can you balance that? Well, to date, nobody has except me. How is that possible? Because I'm a smart fucker. And I'm not as crazy as people think I am. The same reason the Norwegian Sovereign Fund, when it went over $1 trillion, they interviewed Obama and Clinton and Kissinger and all kinds of people for 20 minutes. They stayed with me 2.5 fucking days. And, it sounds braggadocious because I am, you may never have somebody as smart as me sitting on this fucking stool again, or ever. But I decided 31 years ago, if I made all the money, how's that prove the system? It doesn't. But the meatheads, and some of the meatheads, if you had them sitting here, well, you wouldn't have them sitting. But if you want to have a jolly, as they say in the UK, this guy, you say, there's a reason why Dan calls him meathead. There's a reason why Dan calls him brain dead. And more importantly, there's a reason why they allow him to call them brain dead. Who else has millions of followers that I demean on a daily basis? But I made them fucking rich. Fucking rich. Money's not everything. It's not. But it's the only thing anybody keeps track of. And I've decided 30 plus years ago, I'll give them my teachings to the extent they listen, and then it's up to them to save the world. But that's not my goal. I wasn't put here to save the world. I was there to, show it's not as hard. It's very hard, but it's not impossible to make a lot of money. Honestly, it's got to be moral, ethical, and within the rule of law. Well, ethics and morals swing in the wind, but when you're within the rule of law, that eliminates about 80% of the world. And it's, we have guys, I got sued here recently, and they're deposing one of my superstars. I call her the Viking bitch. And they show a picture of me saying cunt, shit, all these words. And so they look down at her and they say, well, how is that something that you would want your kids to, follow? And she says, when I met Mr. Pena, I made $10,000 a month. Now I make $10 million a month. That's my answer. My son is ranked number one in the United States of America, 12 to 15 MMA. And she goes, because she's trained the kids after me. That's my answer. I don't care what fucking words he uses. And I have arguably 1 million of those.
You trained a lot of people.
Yes, sir, I have. But I also have double murders, full disclosure.
In your classes?
No, I mean, they came to me after they double murdered. They served their time.
And they're looking to change their lives?
Yeah, and they are. Or they have. I've got, the only thing I don't take are pedophiles. And that's not something you put on your resume, but we do copious checks. I mean, we just because you said so, and we have a long process to accept people, a lot of questions.
How much is your seminar?
27,000 pounds, which is, I think, $35,000.
Right.
The double murder guy, if you were sitting here, you'd think he was a priest. He could wear a collar and get away the way he talked to you. You'd think he's a priest. He's going to hear your confession. But I've trained some ruthless guys.
What are the qualities you look for most?
Enthusiasm. If you're enthusiastic, even if you're wrong, I can flip you. And that's the terminology I use. If you're not enthusiastic, I'll let and I'm not a motivator like they call me.
Motivational speaker?
No. I am a great one. I leave the audiences crying or laughing, but I'm not the slappy happy, jump up and down kind of guy, no.
What is your greatest quality, would you say?
My enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. And I don't give up on you unless you give up on yourself. I never give up on anybody. You can't find anybody. It's like raising kids. Some of the guys and gals have put me through the ringer, but I never give up on them. I just got an email from one of the guys in Australia. He's done 38 acquisitions. He's fought off cancer, given up until I put my foot up his ass. And I'm not the guy you lost your mother. I just had dinner in Dubai with stars, and his mother and father died the same day during Corona. Within 45 minutes of each other. And it's too bad, Graham, but next. I'm not, that's not me. That's not me. And I say this, I have 2 grandchildren, and when I met my grandson for the first time, and he wears shirts, Cure Legend, okay, which he's already gotten fights at school about. But anyway, my son hands me the baby like this. And my wife was here. I had to look at it. Now, they say minutes passed. I don't believe that. Kiss the baby, my wife tells me. So I leaned forward and kissed the baby on the forehead. Didn't take it. My dad didn't have a dad, and he trained me like Army. When I went off to the Army, the first night, there's 300 in the barracks, 3 bunk beds in a row like this, and guys were crying the first time they'd been away from home. I mean, literally, you could hear 15, 20, 30 guys crying, sobbing. And in those days, they beat you in the military in the 60s, not like today. And so I said, this is fucking nothing. You should have been raised by me. This is a goddamn country club. I thought the military was a country club. And I wanted to be a career Army officer. I loved the beating. I loved the beating and giving beatings. I loved it. I thrived on it. And I got an award for being the youngest, some bullshit. I'm not demeaning the award, but I call everything bullshit. And I'm standing in a bar at the Officers Club, which we don't have Officers Club anymore because we want to be slappy happy, everybody together. And so a 3-star General Woodrow Vaughn is on this side of me, and a 1-star General Roy Atterbury. Now I'm standing with generals as a fucking second lieutenant, which didn't happen then. And General Vaughn said, Pena, you're going to buy the drinks tonight. Yes, sir. So about the 3rd or 4th drink, and drinks were then like 40 cents in the officer club. And then Roy Atterbury, who was more or less like a racist kind of guy from Texas, and he used to call me a wetback Mexican. This man's army to have a wetback Mexican officer standing here next to General Vaughn and I is a tragedy of biblical proportion. You understand that, Pena? Yes, sir. So then Woodrow Vaughn, the 2-star general, 3-star general, he said, you know, Dan, why am I know I've had a few drinks, but I don't understand why I'm buying the drinks for 2 generals. And then Roy Atterbury punches me in the side. You're not supposed to say that. And he says, didn't I just give you a money award a few weeks ago for being whatever you were? I said, yes, sir, but you know how much that government check was? It's a $50 war bond worth $50 in 31 years. So it's worth about $8 now. So General Vaughn turned and he says, Roy, you're buying the next drink. And he says, but a young man like you could get wealthy in the civilian world. And as God is my witness, as I'm looking at you, that blonde hair, a light bulb went up over my head like this. Wealthy, Dan Pena, civilian world. I was out of the Army in 6.5 months. And I was a regular Army officer. That's impossible to get out of the Army in 6.5 months. I never connected those dots.
Is that where the idea first came to you?
Yes, sir.
Really?
I didn't know, I had never heard the word million. People don't believe that. I had never heard the word million until about a month before that. I'm at the Officers Club in this at Ramstein Air Force Base, and the bar, open bar for everybody. And I get there late. I asked one of the guys, he says, why is it an open bar? He says, Dave just inherited 1.4 million. That's the first time I ever heard the word million. And I said, could you write that down for me, Henry? And he goes, well. And that's the first time I had ever seen 1,400,000. So then I run to the bar thinking, well, we're going to run out of money pretty soon. I better start drinking. So those 2 acts, 1.4 million, some guy inherited from his grandmother, and General Vaughn, who said that in the civilian world, you can get rich. And I remember I wrote my parents a letter. My dad didn't say he was pissed off, but I could tell he was pissed off because he thought I had found a home. I had found a home. And now I'm willy-nilly going to get out. Because to be an officer in those days, you had to sign up for extra years. And now my dad probably thought he's never going to fucking get out. You don't know me. I mean, I could flip Harris to vote for Trump. I mean, I'm a very persuasive guy. And I was out, and I promised my mother that I was finished university, either while in the military, for sure, but now I'm out. And so nobody had ever graduated from college, my mother's family. So I went back to CSUN, finished up, and then I went off to Wall Street and did some pretty fucking incredible things.
How important is dreaming big?
Oh, it's everything.
It's everything, isn't it?
It's everything. I've trained Olympians. I've trained Lakers during their three-peat from years ago. And I remember a crybaby who's getting paid $8 million a year to sit on the bench behind Kobe, sitting in my home in Rolling Hills. I said, there's worse things that could happen, idiot. He said, I only get in when Kobe gets tired, which he never gets tired, or he gets hurt. And we don't want him to get hurt because that's the franchise. And but they used to send me their problem children, the Lakers. But the Olympians, I've trained a bunch of them. And the super premier athletes are all elitists. Of course, they are elitists.
But what are the qualities they all share?
Oh, enthusiasm, never give up.
They love what they're doing.
Oh, and they have a passion. Training is not training. When I was a young guy, I worked. I got interviewed by Forbes last year, and I said something to the effect, "What is the one thing, Mr. Pena, that you attribute your success to?" The countless 100 to 120-hour work weeks. That's it. Now I work 50, 60 hours a week, but I don't consider it work. I haven't had to work in 40 years. But for those of you that are contemplating early retirement, you never have enough money because you spend it faster than you think. And by the time you wake up, how could I have gone through that much money in 5, 7, 11, 12 years? But I've always had my finger in several pies. I'm currently chairman of 20 companies, 17 of which are successful, 3 of which are marginal. But I wanted to stay in the Army. I wanted to say I loved it. I just fucking loved it. I love the discipline. I like discipline. Mm-hmm. I like being accountable because I always outperform everybody. Except for athletics. The only failures I've had, I have something called peripheral neuropathy. Mm-hmm. And I've always been clumsy to catch a ball or throw a ball, etc.
Your strengths are elsewhere.
Yeah, that's it. But my dad was an All-American athlete. Oh. So that's one of the things that pushed me because he never mentioned it, but I could look in his eyes when I went out for football and I went out for baseball and I went out for this and I dropped the ball or whatever. He never mentioned it. I support scholarships where he went to high school here at Lincoln High School, athletic scholarship. We're in our 16th year. And we've sent a lot of kids off to university. Not athletic scholarships, but these were athletes in high school. In conjunction with that, got good grades, actually superb grades. And we sent a lot of kids off to school. And now the first scholarships we gave 15 years ago, the kids are partners in some law firms. They're partners with some big investment banks. And a lot of them want to save the world. But what normally happens, you want to save the world and you're marching around embassies, blah, blah, blah. Go off to university, which normally is a liberalizing process. And then you start making whatever the amount of money which is important to you. And maybe you do something for your parents, maybe buy them a car or even a house. And then life catches up with you. And then you're not carrying placards anymore. And you're not doing this. And now you got a house in New York, you got a house in the Hamptons, you got a house in Manhattan, and you got a summer house in Palm Springs. Okay? And you start eating through the money that you wanted to save the world with, and all of a sudden your checks to save the world.
Real life catches up.
Correct.
Tell me about the proliferation of snowflakes in our society.
And snowflakes, just to be clear, aren't every snowflake that hits the ground is different. Okay, and that's not the snowflake, as you well know, that I'm alluding to. I'm talking about you melt under pressure, and not pressure that I consider pressure. There's a new thing out about the last 5 or 10 years at certain companies. Netflix is one of them. Amazon is another one. It's called outcome management. You manage a division. This division, we hire you from wherever. The division did $750 million last year. It's up to you to drive it in the second year to $1 billion. That's the end of the thing. That's all your contract says. It's an outcome. But also in that contract, if you don't drive it to $1 billion, you're fired. Now, ands, ifs, interest rates, the fucking war, nothing. You're fired. A lot of guys won't sign those contracts. I wish to God I had contracts like that, okay? And when I say I'll do whatever it takes, I mean it. And today, a lot of the management styles, especially yelling at people, we have people at the seminar that have never been yelled at. We have people at the seminar that have never been in a fistfight altercation on the school grounds, schoolyard. We have people at the seminar that have never been reprimanded by their parents. Never. We have people at the seminar. Do you realize that 8 out of 10 employees in the Fortune 500, non-board, cry weekly? 8 out of 10. We have people at the seminar that wouldn't say shit if it was in their mouth. Never. And I'm normally the last thing you try if you want to leave your corporate life or private life, entrepreneurial life, that you've failed at everything. The world is flat. I'm the last town, the last saloon on the precipice. You've tried everything known because they know I'm going to rip you a new asshole. And I'm going to give you the tools, whether you use them or not, it's up to you. But the snowflakes, by the time they get to me, almost all of them are eliminated. But there's still people that think, well, maybe he's not that tough. He's getting ready to retire. Maybe he's softened up. Maybe I can get the tools without getting abused. But the interesting thing about it is 98% of everything I do in the seminar is free on my site. I don't sell any product. Everything's free. But people think that it's that 2% that's secret sauce, and they come. Well, it's not. If you look hard enough on YouTube and stuff like that, 100% of everything I say is online. But they failed at everything. And at the end of the day, by the third day, I know who's going to succeed. It's 6 days. Third day, I know. I actually know in the first hour.
Really? What do you see?
I see most of the kids have spent their careers beyond education. Some have education, some don't have education. Trying the easy way out. All the other gurus, and I don't consider myself one of those gurus, tells you it's easy to do what I have created on paper. These are audited numbers. I'm not just making these fucking numbers out, pulling them out my ass, and it's not easy. 0.00008% of the planet can do what I do. That's not many out of 8.3 billion. But they think that, well, I'm an exception to that rule. Because on the one hand, their mother and father, mostly the mother, you can be anything you want, Johnny, which is a lie. But if you hear that long enough and loud enough for as many years, they sometimes believe it. But I mean, it's harder to be successful in my program than win a gold medal at the Olympics. And we have data, all kinds of data. It's harder.
What is a perfect combination? You have a mother who supports you and loves you and thinks you're...
No, not too much gushy. Okay, we're the average of 5 people we spend the most time with between 0 and 18. 5, okay. Maybe a mom, almost always a mom. And they can be too gushy, but anyway. A part-time dad, if at all. An older sibling. A grandparent, one grandparent, and the next door neighbor kid. Now, what the fuck do those people know anything about producing a high-performance person? Nothing. And unless you're Kobe Bryant, unfortunately, he and his daughter went down in a plane, there's no chance. And there's enough things online, unfortunately. Now information is almost instantaneous. For all intents and purposes, it is instantaneous. But who's telling you how to be a high-performance person? And almost all high-performance coaches don't relate to money because they have not produced any money. I'm the only guy that talks about numbers, the only guy. And now, I mean, although 2.3 trillion, Somebody's going to do. I guess anything's possible, but it's not likely somebody's going to, create. When I first started coaching, the first seminar I gave in for money, May of '93 at the Sheraton Hotel downtown LA, I charged $1,000. 60 people showed up. I pocketed 60 grand less the hotel bill. It started at 8 in the morning. It went to 8 at night. No breaks. Only water, no coffee. And from 8 at night till the last question, I answered questions. That first seminar I went to 3:30 in the morning. Questions. You will not leave unless all your questions are answered. I don't do that anymore because some of the questions, they repeat themselves. And so that would be a day. So what I teach in a week, I used to teach in a day. And but it gets down to how am I going to make money as quickly as humanly possible? Okay? They don't ask about the commitment because I have a thing called pay, price, and action. You want to lose? Well, you don't have to lose weight, maybe 2 pounds. But what does it cost? What do I have to do to lose weight? Higher energy output, less calories, or something like that. Okay, intellectually we understand that, but when you have to tell your wife on her birthday, you don't have to tell your wife anything. But I mean, part of the program, you're in the middle of hiring a dream team or a transaction, and your wife's birthday or girlfriend, whatever, comes up. Honey, I have to work. Or I like to make my first appointments with people on Valentine's Day, Christmas Day, New Year's Day, Easter Sunday, Diwali, which is the Indian celebration right now that's going on. Because if they can't commit to get by that small test, they're certainly not going to be able to work. We just had, I worked 10 days, 100, 120 hours a week, 10 years, almost to the day. The guy, super successful guy we got now, a kid named Raymond, took him 822 days to do his first transaction. Now this guy is Harvard, smart. But those Harvard degrees don't mean shit. First of all, Harvard degrees are a dime a dozen. You talked about the 2 art schools, and now look at you.
Yeah.
Without attending, I don't need to explain to you, okay? But they bought off on that load of crap. And now, when the inclusion and all the stuff they talk about, which I believe in some and I don't believe in others, but my daughter has said words to the effect, Daddy, I would have to fuck a cow in the lobby, and the chairman and the CEO would have to stumble by and see me, and I still couldn't get fired. A lot of truth in that. And, I don't see your color, green, purple, yellow. I don't see, one arm, one tit, one eye. I don't see any of that. All I see is producing future numbers for me, that if you do produce numbers that I can put on my tally, and now to move 2.3 trillion, I mean, you got to put up a big number, okay? And then whatever you do with the money is God bless you. Allah be with you. I wash my hands like Pontius Pilate. All the refresher material that you'll ever need is on my website. And the stuff that we put out for every seminar is not state-of-the-art, best practice, best of the best. Stuff that worked yesterday afternoon. And because of the internet, the only drawback we had is during Corona, people got lazy because they could do business on Zoom. And my program is shake hands like an insurance salesman, eyeball to eyeball. We're going to see the sun go down, and we may see the sun go up sitting in that kitchen drinking coffee. And the kids don't like that. And most kids today, their biggest lacking is communication. You have 2 times to make a first impression. One, when they look at you the first time, and people can fake that. But the second is when you open your big mouth. And when you place your foot in your big mouth, then no matter how good you looked, and we wear a uniform, mandatory. The girls too. It's a little harder to judge what's appropriate business attire for a woman today. And I tell them, no, that doesn't work, sweet pea. the stockings that look like lettuce, things, crossing.
Yeah, right.
That doesn't work today. It never worked unless you're a hooker. And you say that to a woman and she goes ape shit because you can't say that. And can you be too fat and do this? Not really. I have a 440-pounder. It's as big as that fucking chair you're leaning up against. And I got him down to 70 pounds, anorexic, and everything in between. But I've got nymphomaniacs. I've got, you name it, I've got them. But I can't fill your cup with my knowledge until you empty all the bullshit. We have two bank accounts in life. We have an emotional bank account and we have a financial bank account. Most people worry about the financial bank account. And if you can't get over your emotional bank account, you're never going to fill your financial bank account up. But that's what we're worried about. And I don't preach you have to have 6 months of reserve and all that thing. I grew up, one of the stupidest acts I've ever seen is in my neighborhood, old neighborhood, when you paid off your mortgage, you had a mortgage burning party. They'd get 55-gallon drums, and they burned the mortgage. About the second or third one, I'm 14 or 13 or something. I said, Dad, why are they burning the only goddamn proof they have that they own this piece of shit? Nobody could answer the question. But somebody had done it from, I don't know when. The Civil War, no, they didn't have a Civil War out here for the most part. But there's a lot of things we do. For example, people are worried about credit scores. Now, this is not financial advice, okay? There don't need to be a disclaimer below me. But I mean, for the most people, the credit score is a myth. It's a fucking myth. It's bullshit. You're a double murderer, you got a low credit score. It's crap. And there's a lot of things that people think they're important that aren't.
What do you think is wrong with the way we educate our children? Like in school, they're teaching geometry, trigonometry. When we all have these cell phones, you can do all that stuff very quickly. But we're not teaching the importance of like long-term gratification or how to relate to each other, how to get along. The importance of like. Well,
I mean, what transcends whether it's the math or getting along is accountability of your actions. Every action on the other side has a reaction. And I understand when you call some girl that's got a fat butt, a lard ass, but really what's wrong with that is it has a long-term effect. I've got one of my superstars. Her father called her pork chop because she had a muscular, large butt. To this day, she just turned 70 in October. She hears the word pork, and she doesn't break out in hives anymore because she's had a lot of therapy. But I understand, okay? We should be accountable for our actions. But when you come to hear me, other than all the disclaimers, we tell people, we show them examples, blah, 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 blah. Dan's going to say not nice things about you, blah, blah, blah. But ripping them down like in the Marine Corps to their bone marrow and then building them up is not a popular methodology anymore. But it's the only one that I know 100% works. It doesn't work for everyone, though. But for those that it works, I mean, they feel like they're born again.
Do you think parenting the way your dad did or calling your daughter pork chop?
No, with a pork chop, and I was chubby all my life.
No, but do you think parenting in that way?
No. Discipline, yes. Pork chop, no. Okay. But today, I was raised, sticks and stones can break your bones, but words can never hurt you. My dad used to say, because I had a lot of fights. And he said, it's not what they say about you or to you, son. It's how you interpret it. Smart guy. And so all my life, what he meant to say was this, and I put a positive spin. And And I believed in the underdog. I was during grammar school up to about the 7th or 8th grade. I was the biggest kid on campus, and smaller kids would come when the bully was pushing them around, and so I fought a bunch of bullies and beat them up, broke arms and shit like that, which I'm not proud of. It's just what happened. But I do know that of the parents my age and slightly younger that didn't discipline their kids, the kids are all fucked up. I was afraid of doing drugs because of my dad. My kids were afraid of doing drugs because of me. I'm not saying they haven't done any, but they were petrified. And I like it that way.
Were you similar to your kids the way your dad was to you?
Not as hard. Hard, but compared, our daughter turned 16. I said, you can have any car you want, which was a mistake. But she bought Car Magazine's Car of the Year, cost $22,000. The girl across the street from where we lived turned 16. She got a Learjet. We lived at that time, and this is not why we moved there. The highest per capita income of any incorporated city in the United States of America.
Rancho Perla.
No, it's Rolling Hills Estates.
Rolling Hills.
Behind the gates. We had the kids there. Well, we live on the hill. Behind the gates, on the crest, and we lived at 55 Crestwood East, the highest home in LA County, overlooking the Pacific Ocean with the dolphins and shit like this. The 3.6 acres. And at one time, Kevin Costner wanted to buy the house because we had a permit for a helicopter for him to take to Burbank. And then Roseanne Barr wanted to, anyway, it's really a swanky deal. It's one of the pieces of property I wish I didn't sell. But they were, and it's grounding people. Is it grounding with iPhones or without iPhones? If you're sick, you don't watch TV. If you're well enough to watch TV, you go to fucking class. I believe, and I have data to prove it, that kids have too many choices. Way too many. I'm not just talking about the things they see on the internet. Parents are soft because you would rather be their friend. I told my kids since they could hear, 1, 2, 3, when you're 30, I don't want your love, I want your respect. And every single one of them, when I turned about 30, gee, Dad was smart. I'm not sure my kids love me today. I'm not losing any sleep on it. Ostensibly, by all the standards that normal people measure their kids, I have super high-performance, successful kids. I know that they could do 10 times more. They could do maybe 1,000 times more. But they're comfortable, and so God love them, because when you tell a kid, all I want you to do is be happy, I think we should use different words than that. It's happy with what? Because you will change what you're happy about as you grow older. And you'll think, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? You want to feel fulfilled, not necessarily happy.
That's right.
And of course, when you're young, you don't know what that means. And when you're old, at my age, supposedly it's too late, but it's not. I'm still involved in some pretty remarkable stuff.
But you're fulfilled.
Yeah. I'm going to have a couple of regrets.
What's your biggest regret?
My biggest regret is that I didn't. I should have been a little tougher on my kids. A little tougher. I should have been tougher, not in the sense, or in the sense that when you get to be an adult, it costs money to buy things. And even though I told them, Mom and I are giving all the money away, which we are. Our kids aren't going to get anything, okay? And we started giving our money away when I turned 60, 19 years ago. But now that they're in their late 30s, early 40s, it resonates that they're not getting my money.
Teaches them how to make it themselves.
Exactly.
Which is the best gift you can give them.
Yep. And But it's, when you're 14, 15, 17, you say they're just words out of Dad's mouth. And they ask my wife, does Dad really mean that? And he says, I'm afraid so. You should pay attention to what he says. And now, of course, and we legitimately give a lot of money away. But we've been giving a lot of money away for years, for almost 20 years.
What are you proudest of?
I'm proudest that I've been able to teach people with no money from the hood how to be independently wealthy. And that'll be my legacy. I probably won't live to see it. But the neighborhood that I come from, I like being able to support the school that I try to kill the teacher in. I like supporting various things, also the veterans. But people are too intimidated. They love the Steve Jobs story. They love a lot of the stories, but they're not willing to make the same sacrifices as those guys made. I worked for Apple, Steve, for a while in the 80s. I may be the last guy to see him alive, actually, in Bangalore, India, about, 3 or 4 weeks before he died. But he was a ruthless fucker. He's beyond ruthless. Only took his daughter that he had out of marriage, I forget that lady's name, when he found out she was a genius. Well, then maybe she is mine. I mean, these guys are all ruthless. But all you want to do, not you, well, look at what he's achieved, and he did change the world. Steve is one of the guys that did change the world. But, he changed it over a lot of corpses. And
is that a good thing or a bad thing?
No, well,
it's both.
They've told me a guy that's very famous, worth a couple $100 billion today, said, Dan, you could be our first trillionaire if you were just ruthless enough. I remember that at breakfast, like I took a piss this morning, and I've always had a reputation of being hard. I still. And I've had another guy, a big IT guy, if you had been in our business, you would have been a trillionaire. Because I've done some of the great deals of all time that turned nothing into hundreds of millions, when hundreds of millions before the internet. I'm doing a deal right now that I arguably can make $1 trillion. But if I do or I don't, it's not going. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. My reputation legacy is pretty set already. But it was nice. But more importantly, all the other guys that are involved would make billions. And they can go change the world. But you're old enough to remember 15, 18 years ago, one of the billionaires, his name escapes me, said if we all put up 10% of our money, you know how many put up money? 0. Mm-hmm. We could solve poverty in the entire world with a stroke of a pen. And you know why they don't do that in Africa, Ethiopia, wherever? Because of corruption. None of the money's almost none of the money's going to get down to where it belongs. They have a deal called the CAP 28's coming up, where the wealthy countries get together and say how they're going to spend money for the poor countries. This is CAP 28. Every year they pledge between 100 and 500 million. You know how much money's been given? 0. And it's because of the C word, corruption. But nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about it. Everybody knows it, but nobody talks about it. And we've been in Haiti. We've been all kinds of places. At the end of the day, it all comes down to the money getting stolen. How much money can you get to the actual needed recipient? And in most cases, it's almost nothing. It's almost nothing.
What do all these leaders have in common? You mentioned like Steve Jobs, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates. Like what do they? What do they?
Well, let me just. And this is public information, so I'm not telling any secrets. About 15 or 18 years ago, on a program called 60 Minutes, CBS Channel 2 here. I don't know what it. the guy that's retired from 60 Minutes, the black guy, a nice journalist, he's interviewing the granddaughter of Warren. At the end of the, and she says that he's not Santa Claus, he's a ruthless, blah, blah, blah. The program ended at 7 p.m. Sunday. By noon, Tuesday, all of her side of the family was disinherited. By noon, Tuesday. You know how many thousands of hours of lawyers that took? That's pretty fucking ruthless to me. Some 19-year-old bimbo, doesn't know shit from apple butter, flapped her lips. We got rid of all our assets. We're in 100% cash for almost 20 years. People say, what about inflation? Right? If you got to worry about inflation, you're not making enough fucking money. Bunker Hunt told me that a long, long time ago, okay? But my wife manages a small portfolio for our grandchildren. Not maybe small to most people, but small to us. It's got Google and those kind of stocks in it. And so one of them is Berkshire Hathaway. So we went to the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting a couple years ago. I wanted to see one. Charlie Munger was still alive in those days. And every 50 feet, there is a security guard with an automatic weapon. 35,000 people in the big convention hall. Every 50 feet. If you were going to vote against something on the annual agenda, you were in another auditorium a mile down the road. If you were going to vote against. His followers are like Trump's followers, zealots. Okay? We went to his office. He had the same office, 3,100 square feet office space in Omaha, Nebraska. He leases it. Everybody invests in real estate. He leases the building. He's lived in the same fucking house for 59 years, 3,000 square feet. He leases his cars. The next financial tsunami to hit the U.S. is commercial real estate. There are 25 1 million square foot buildings in Manhattan that are empty. The same size as, not the Eiffel Tower, what's the big tall building in Manhattan? The King Kong.
The World Trade Center?
No. Anyway, there's 25. Beverly Hills real estate has gone down 23 of the last 25 quarters in value. Beverly Hills. Mayfair, which is the Beverly Hills of London, 29 of the last 30 quarters has gone down in value. I can go on and on and on. A year ago this month, Elon Musk said he's not paying his 1.7 billion rental payments for his office space ever again. He has not paid them. 2025, all 65 or 73% of all the major commercial real estate deals come to fruition, have to be renewed. They're all down the shitter. Why doesn't anybody say this? Because they're afraid it'll be a self-fulfilling prophecy. First commercial, then your house. The world's fucked. You know how when you flush the toilet and the poop, the last poop to go down and go, ugh! That's where we are. We're just, ugh! And everybody knows it. That's got any money or brains.
So what's a smart move?
There aren't any.
There aren't any?
Cash. Don't worry about interest rates. Or inflation, I should say. And you can't buy and store enough gold to save yourself. And I happen to know who really started crypto. So, I mean, it's not really fair for me to comment on the crypto craze, although I've been anti it. I'm good at getting out, but I have a few crypto billionaires. Not because I gave them advice, but, they were buying it at $80. 25 cents one of them was buying it at. So, I mean, it's not too difficult to be a billionaire when you're buying it for less than $50.
Yeah.
The world's fucked. It's just Nobody wants to stand up and, we could solve all this with a stroke of a pen.
Well, technology has hurt us as much as it's helped us.
Yes, artificial intelligence is the hottest thing on earth, but all we have to do is all the countries under the auspices of the World Bank devalue the currency 50% and all this goes away. Who's going to do that? What administration is going to do that? None. But I think it was. I was watching the news today. How does Kamala Harris? How is she worth $200 million now? I think. God bless her. I think that's pretty funny, actually. And for global warming, I've actually been to both poles. I've had scientific. There's 11 expeditions to the North and South Pole since the beginning of time. 10 are dead. My wife and I are still alive. We've been there. And and it's climate change. But if global warming is real, best case scenario is 3 meters, 10 feet, rise in the water. Manhattan, Southern California, amongst many others, are gone. Okay. Worst case scenario is 10 meters, 30 feet. 2/3 of the planet is gone. Why Obama, who I don't particularly like, why did he buy a house? First of all, where did he get the $48 million? But to buy a house off of Maui right there on the water. Don't you think he'd be smart enough he's going to be here for global warming if it's for real. 17 of the top 20 richest guys on the planet have bought homes in the last 10 years on the water. Why? Are they stupid? Do they have a death wish? Or is it just a load of hot shit? Well, anyway. But that's why the 3 sovereign funds, I don't have a photographic memory, but I kind of have one. Not, there's some things the doctors have told me when I was in my 50s. I have a selective memory. So I can remember things, comma, decimal, of stuff that interests my brain. But I've been but I was this smart when I was a kid. I was this smart in the kid. But as the teacher that had the broken glass in her office, she said, we didn't know how to treat gifted. I said, hear that, Sally? I went from dunce cap to gifted. But the world's in a bad state. And anybody that believes otherwise, and I know we've all heard, one man can make a difference, one woman. Yeah, 200 years, correct. And some of the things, and part of the alligator mouth overloading his hummingbird ass for Mr. Trump is when you do a 10-year project in 10 months, there's a lot of collateral damage. He doesn't give a shit about it. You can't do these things without collateral damage. And normally collateral damage, shit rolls downhill. The poor guy is going to get hurt more than the rich guy because the rich guy's got staying power. I don't think that's going to change. The Romans had their time. The Persians had their time. If Professor Hawkins is right, we've had our time. We've had a good run. Why aren't we worried about the asteroid that's going to hit us in 2182? I think it's 2182. You don't even hear about it. Because we're going to figure out a way to blow out the asteroid away, maybe, which will be collateral damage. Little pieces will fall. Okay. I happen to know that there is a scientific cure for climate change being studied at Cambridge, MIT, Caltech, and a couple other schools for the last almost 20 years. A scientific cure. And it's analogous to when we defoliated North Vietnam which caused Agent Orange, which caused a bunch of other problems. So sometime, and if I know it, Obama knows it. So, but the average schnook out there doesn't know that. I have connections to the Vatican. I have connections at the Pentagon. And the average schnook has connections no place. And so, and it's unfortunate about fake news. I mean, there's a lot of it. This is horseshit. It's horseshit. And but when Sally and I, when we were in Dubai on a project and to visit some of my successful mentees, it's interesting how you can get caught up with the glitz. A guy that had 4 employees who just closed a $82 million fund, and we celebrated by going out to dinner. It's easy to get caught up with the glitz, like a Hollywood movie. And I'm kind of like a wet blanket. But, they're going to live. Their grandchildren may not get hurt. But there's a time when you got to pay the piper. We have $33 trillion, I guess, in debt now here. We could have stopped this a long time ago. Will the Democrats do it? No. Will the Republicans do it? No. So who's going to do it? Any of your listeners? Probably not. Probably not. So spend a lot of money and don't worry about the asteroid. But the more that a year ago, October, I almost died from blood poisoning. I went in for a small procedure, a little cut here, and I almost died about it. But while I was there in bed, dying, I had a different perspective. When you're going to die, what do you worry about, the things you haven't done or the things you've done? I said, I got a lot of shit. I can't die now. I mean, I told my wife, I can't fucking die. I got a lot of stuff to do. But I've always, I start every day like it was the last 2 minutes of my last Super Bowl. Every single day. And some days it's harder than others. Some days it's harder than others. But it's never impossible.
It's great to have that fire.
Yeah. And I've had it. I've run towards the gunfire all the time. But I went to my 6th-year high school reunion a couple months ago. I was shocked how the guys and the gals have aged in the last 10 years. I was the only member that talked about the 70-year reunion 10 years from now. The only one. Based on the stats, we may not have many people there for the 70th, but they're burned out. In my family, the men lived to the early to mid-90s, the women late 90s, early 100s. Without a push-up, a jog, most drank and smoked. So unless somebody shoots me or I get hit by a car or something, or my plane goes down, I'm here for a long time yet. So but it's the older I get, the harder it is to play like the last 2 minutes of Super Bowl. Why, when you see the Super Bowl, they seem to score at will? Because the guys on the field aren't worried about the next game. It's this or nothing. And they realize if they get hurt, doesn't matter. But it's I've been like this for a long, long time. A long time. And I find it not ironic. That's not the right word. I'm not sure I know the right word. That most people that get to be my age are sitting, not rocking chairs. That's an old metaphor, but
they're slowing down.
Yeah, they've run out of gas, and you can only bounce your grandkids. I never did this. Bounce your grandkids so much, and you can only play so much golf.
Have you slowed down?
Oh yeah, I've slowed down. I'm down from 100 hours a week to 50 or 60. But I didn't consider when the stock market or the world exchanges went on the 24/7, 365, I remember telling a bunch of guys, my contemporaries, my team at the time, why would you ever want to fucking sleep? You can make money 24/7, 365. I used to live at my office. My secretary used to go to Brooks Brothers and buy me a half a dozen shirts, underwear. And I was in awe of the fact that there were so many opportunities. And now it's even not worse or better, depending on how you look at it. Now, I don't believe in not going to the office, but the kids can make gazillions from home. Not in the bathtub they get electrocuted, but it's amazing. There's not that many jobs. And I happen to know some very high-powered scientists. And these people say that artificial intelligence is not going to do anything to the workforce. They're crazy. That's a lie. That's a lie.
It already has.
Oh, absolutely. But just as, why did Obama buy a house on the water? But I find it more amusing, why does Obama's cook, who was a world-class swimmer, drowned in 3 feet of water the week before he's going to publish his book about the Obama family? I find that more amusing. Mm-hmm. Or why do 51, current count, of Hillary Clinton's friends commit suicide that were going to testify about the server that she put acid on to erase all the information? Just a coincidence, I guess. But I believe that we're at a crossroads, that we still have 50 years or maybe 100 years to make a world a better place. But there are people that I know, of my ilk, if that's the right terminology. Why should we be concerned about making the world a better place when it might not be here 100 years from now? That's a fair question.
Yeah.
That's a fair question. So what kind of people are you following in your on this podcast?
What kind of people do I interview?
No. What kind of people listen to your interview?
Oh, I have no idea. They're just a bunch of anonymous people on social media. I mean, I meet people when I'm at a grocery store or at the gym, and they seem like a pretty, solid cross-section of society. I don't think it's a bunch of wealthy people or drug addicts or, it's just people that are interested in human stories.
Well, they have podcasts for drug addicts,
Yeah.
prisoners. One of my success stories is a black guy who attended my last seminar. He got wealthy while in prison using my methodology. And he's already rich. And he came to the seminar, and, on one-on-one, you tell the story. And then graduation night afterwards, and they had a few drinks. Although he doesn't drink, you get up and you tell us part of your story anyway. Like an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, My name's Dan, I'm an alcoholic, I got 9 years sobriety, blah, blah. He says, and I've known this before, I have a following in prison that a lot of guys have made, and most of the guys that have made money in prison are paying for their lawyers to get out, okay? But it's I'm across the board from murderers to, some of the depths of. But my following is kind of split between pro-Ukraine. Hardly anybody's pro-Russia, but it's split almost 50-50. Palestine, Israel, or Gaza, Israel. That's about a 50-50 split.
I just find human stories interesting, like how you grew up, where you grew up, how the things that happened to you when you were 8 years old affect you when you're 40, 50 years old. I find all that stuff interesting. Well,
it is, and it becomes more interesting when you get closer to my age, and you look at turning points in your life. And mine was the military for sure. My dad being a hard ass for sure, absolutely, and less the nourishing part. I used to be a mama's boy when the first 5 or 6 years. I can't ever remember being farther away than that 4 inches from my mom. I used to, but and life's got a lot of twists and turns, and the decisions a lot of kids make in their 20s and 30s might have seemed right for them then, but they sure as hell aren't right for them in their 40s or 50s. But you still make them. But it's like the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. What do those 5 people, if at all, have any knowledge about creating or raising or a high-performance person? Tiger Woods' dad, who I used to know, as an example, hard ass, used to whack Tiger. The Williams sisters, also from Torrance, hard ass dad, used to whack the girls. Now I can go down the whacking list. Not much nourishing there. Now Tiger had his mom, who's still alive, nourished. I don't know the Williams' mom.
But that's probably this. I asked that question earlier. Having this kind of mom and that kind of dad probably creates the ideal.
It also creates tension.
For sure. Like I had that kind of dad and I had that kind of mom that we're talking about. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's like I love who I am, but I'm not like a perfectly healthy specimen. Like I'm driven like a motherfucker. All I want to do is work. I wake up at 4 a.m. every single day, and all I want to do is achieve. I wake up. I'm sick, but I have a cold right now. I woke up on Friday night and Saturday night. I went to bed early. I went to bed like 6, 7 o'clock. I woke up at midnight. I want to go to work. So I went to work for a few hours, got some shit done, got a lot done, and then I go back to bed for a few hours because I was sick. But it's like if I don't work.
I have an office right next to our bed. I have a main office in the other part of the castle. Then I have an office right next to our bedroom. And so I'll get up, and a few nights ago when we were home, a few weeks ago, I forgot to bring my computer to the second office. And I don't want to go down to my main office because we have 5 dogs. They're not really guard dogs, but I'd wake them up and they'd bark and scream. So, but I get up at 1 or 2 o'clock. I normally go to bed 11:30. I woke up at 1:30 or 2 and worked for an hour and a half. And then I went back to bed, and then I sleep till 9, 10, 11, depending. And what I do realize more than before is I can sense if my body's tired now. Okay? I mean, before, when I was young, I just drive through it and on adrenaline or something.
We're not 20 years old anymore.
Yeah, exactly. But it's interesting. But I mean, my fairy tale dream was to be where I'm living the last 40 years.
Yeah. No, you're living your dream.
Yeah, and
your story is inspirational.
Yeah, but the kids now. To the extent that we sign employment contracts, they're only normally for 30 to 90 days with the kids. 30 to 90, and this is after the vetting, to the extent that we did vetting. And I'll know in 3 days whether I'm going to keep you or not. But, so you have some money to go back to Iowa or whatever, we'll pay you for 30 days. And they said, well, do you really know now? I said, yeah. In fact, I'm withdrawing the contract. Here's a plane ticket, go back to Iowa. I mean, and the kids, aren't you afraid to make a mistake? I said, the number of mistakes that I've made are, I have one dick, I made a mistake once. I put that where I shouldn't have put it, long time ago. I learned from that mistake, so I don't do that anymore. So here's your ticket back to Iowa. But the kids today are, I hope I'm wrong, 100%, but I'm hardly ever wrong. I mean, I just hardly am ever wrong. I have an exceptionally good, sometimes almost perfect judgment. And again, that's why some of the big guys come to me for advice. Now, what's really infuriating is they come this way and they spend hours or days, and then they decide not to do it. Because everybody's got more than one agenda. They got the agenda they tell the shareholders, the banks, etc. Then they got the personal agenda. And my advice almost always puts their personal agenda online or in disrepute. And so they quite often and I'll get a nice letter. It won't say exactly, but we've decided not to follow your course of action. I still get paid, but I mean, course of action. We used to say, when I did a lot of this, for not just the big funds, you've gone to McKinsey, right? I'm just guessing they want $5 million, thereabouts, and they're going to give you a 500-page report. Kind of. I'll do it for $500,000, and I'll give you a 20-page report in a week. They look at me. And when I was building the business 45, 50 years ago, and on this first project, just keep the report and see if I'm right. Then come back and see me if you need me 5, 10 years from now. A handful, 6 or 7, kept the report and followed the progress that they paid $5 million for, they got from me for free. And they always come back the same. How did you know? I knew. But how? The data points, the da. Sometimes it's the next CEO of the company that comes back to me because the first CEO is so embarrassed he doesn't come back to me. How did you know, Mr. Pena? I don't know, but I knew, didn't I? He says, yes, you did. We have these other 3 projects, but now the price has gone up, gentlemen. I did this for $500,000. Now I want 2, 2, and 3 million apiece. 2 million, 2 million, 3 million. Up front. That used to be my sales pitch. Down deep inside, humanity has a soft spot. And they want to think the best. But thinking the best and getting the best results are 2 different things. Because the agenda I alluded to a few minutes ago, 2 agendas, and then when it's like when you're dealing with foreign governments, I always ask, well, when does the premier get out of office? If he just got into office, then I want to do it. If he's getting out of office in a year and he's trying to save his career, no, I'm not interested. But there's a lot of smart people like me, but most of them are doing business for themselves. Not that many are in the consulting, because if you can't do, you teach, like the old saying is. But I can do, and although I thought I was going to hit $1 trillion, I started in 1993. I thought it'd be done by 2000. So we didn't keep very good records back the first 7 years. And then it didn't happen. And I grossly underestimated the lack of self-esteem in the world. But it took me 17 years where I could actually, with accounting, Deloitte and PricewaterhouseCoopers numbers, I could prove $1 trillion, okay?
Prove that you...
That I have created $1 trillion.
But not in your bank account.
No.
With
yours.
People that did your seminars.
Correct. No. People that did my seminars and then signed up for me to track them. Not everybody signs up for me to track them. Mm-hmm. I may have 200 billionaires, but I don't know about them.
Right.
Okay. I know about 56 of them, though, for absolute, concrete. You can go to the Forbes list. Okay. But some of the big guys that I know, and in the early years, we allowed people to come under fictitious names. I didn't think I'd do this for 30 bloody years. I thought I was doing it for a few. And actually, I'm doing it to prove a bet. Okay? How did I create $500 million in 5.5 years, almost like I didn't try? Because that's how this all formed. Mm-hmm. And so the guy, again, the Marine guy, he said, well, let's reverse engineer how you did it, and you teach it. And so we reverse engineer it. And to look at it in paper, you would think, either I made a deal with the devil, and that's why they call me the man with the Midas touch. Almost everything I touch, not everything, but almost everything I touch turns to gold.